All right. Do we have anybody else in the waiting room?
No.
All right. So it is 1:05, and I guess we will get started. Um, My name is Sheena Jackson, and I am the Director of Admissions and Student Scholarships here at the University of Maryland School of Nursing. Thank you very much for joining us. We're happy to have you today. So, before we dive into our financial aid 101 presentation, I would just like to take out some time to introduce our Assistant Director of Financial Aid. Her name is Laura Evans. Laura is here to provide guidance and support to students and families as they navigate through the often complex world of financial aid. Laura is an expert in financial aid policies and procedures and can answer any of the questions that you have today. So if you have questions after the presentation, Laura will be here to answer any of those questions. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Laura, and she'll be leading us through the Financial Aid 101 presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheena. Good afternoon, everyone. As she indicated, my name is Laura Evans. I'm the Assistant Director of Financial Aid here at UMB. Unfortunately, the dedicated counselor for the School of Nursing Financial Aid, Richard Legendre, he's a little ill today. He's not feeling well, so I'm just taking his place. But I'm happy to help you with any financial aid questions you might have. And with that being said, I'm going to start my presentation for you. It's going to be a little Financial Aid 101. Let me pull this up for you. Okay, so hopefully everyone is able to see the presentation and we're going to get started. So this is going to be Financial Aid 101 for the School of Nursing. So the first thing everyone should do if they're wanting to receive any financial aid is to complete their FAFSA. This is the free application for federal student aid. And it's an online application that you can complete through studentaid.gov. You'll have to create an account, an FSA ID to get you started, but this is where you'll complete that process. The school code for UMB, it's a centralized school code. There's not a separate one for just the School of Nursing, is 002104. This is important because, as we may know, there's lots of schools in Maryland and Baltimore specifically, so that have similar names. So sometimes it's easiest to just type in this school code to make sure you're selecting the right school. This is kind of what it will look like when you're asked to select a school. So you can choose by just doing, the school name, but it might be easier school code because, as you can see, there's several different schools with similar names. You just want to make sure you're sending it to the correct school. If you've already completed a FAFSA for the 2023-2024 academic year and haven't listed UMB yet, you can go in and you can go ahead and just make a correction, enter the school code, and just submit that so we can get that file. So that's not an issue if you've already completed it and didn't include it originally. So this will be your first step to seeing if you're eligible for financial aid for this upcoming academic year. I know some students might be starting in August, some students might not be attending till spring 2024, but you would want to go ahead and complete your FAFSA now. So for this, it's an application that has to be completed each academic year. The priority deadline is March 1 of each year. Of course, we're past that date, but you can still submit it. That's mainly for state scholarships. It might be for some institutional scholarship funds, but you're still eligible to complete your FAFSA still. So still feel free to go ahead and go do that if you haven't already. Like I said, the 2023-2024 FAFSA covers this summer term. We're a header school for summer, so it starts off our academic year. So it covers summer 2023, fall 2023, and then spring 2024. And then for next academic year, you'd want to complete a 24-25 FAFSA, which will become available in December of this year. So completing the FAFSA, I know for nursing that there are different programs. So you might be considered an undergraduate if you're doing like the BSN program, or some might be graduate level students in like the DMP program. So just depending on your program, when you're completing your FAFSA, it's important to make sure that you put the correct grade level so that we can award you the correct financial aid for your program. So for the undergraduate students that have not yet completed a bachelor's degree, you're coming in as a third-year junior. So you'll want to make sure you indicate that you're pursuing your first bachelor's degree and that you're going to be a third-year junior so that we can award you correctly. And then for those that are undergraduate students that have already completed their first bachelor's degree, just indicating that you're pursuing your second bachelor's degree and that you're going to be a fifth year other student. So that way we also can award you correctly. We're not starting you over as like a freshman. And then for the graduate students, you want to make sure that you have completed your first bachelor's and that you're going to be a first year college or graduate professional student. In the subsequent years, you're going to indicate you're a continuing graduate or professional student. You don't want to put that you're a freshman or you're a sophomore if you're in your second. Making sure that you have the correct grade level put on your FAFSA. If for some reason it's incorrect, when we get that, we'll be able to kind of figure that out and find out if it's the correct grade level. There might be some, corrections that need to be made, but it's not a huge issue, but just kind of making sure you're aware of what grade level you'll want to put for your program specifically. So once your FAFSA is submitted and we receive it and you've been admitted to a program, then we can start to put together what's called your cost of attendance, and that's how we build your aid package. So your estimated cost of attendance, we want to make sure you're aware that this is not going to be your bill. This is just helping you kind of get a guideline of what you might be expected to contribute towards your educational costs for this academic year. So it's going to include both direct and indirect costs. The direct costs are going to be your tuition and other university fees that are mandatory, like the shuttle fee. So those are going to actually show up on your bill, which you can view on your SERFS account under the TouchNet link once you're registered for coursework. So those are your direct costs. Those are included in the cost of it. And so the tuition fees that you're going to see on your bill and in your cost of attendance are going to vary from student to student based on your program, your enrollment, your residency status, if you're considered in-state or out of state, and the specific coursework that you're taking. So it can vary. In the cost of attendance, the tuition fees are estimates because we can't account for what you're exactly going to do. If you're going to enroll in different credits, we try to put together the best estimate based on averages for the program. And the cost of attendance is the total maximum amount you can receive in aid, all forms of aid combined. So that's going to be any scholarships, any grants, any federal loans, anything like that has to fit in your cost of attendance. So as I indicated, tuition fees are those direct charges. Those are going to be your bill. The indirect costs that are included in the cost of attendance to put together your budget are going to be living expenses, transportation, health insurance, and I'll put a little asterisk next to that one because I'll come back to that, books, commuting expenses for non-residents, instruments, uniforms, vaccines. So these are all items that you're not going to see on your bill, except for health insurance, which I'll get back to. But these are items that will kind of help you put together a budget to determine how much aid you might need to accept or how much you might need to borrow in loans. So these are going to vary from student to student based on your own personal needs. Some students may not need to account for $2,000 in transportation. They might be taking the shuttle or live close enough to the university to walk. Living expenses, you may not be living, this is based off campus. If you have an apartment or have your own home, you may not be spending as much on living expenses as what we allot for. So these are just to help guide you in creating your own budget to cover your needs for the academic year. I mentioned health insurance has an asterisk next to it. So this can be an indirect cost or a direct cost. If you do not have your own insurance and you're going to be enrolled full-time, the university will charge you university health insurance, and you'll see that on your actual bill. If you have your own health insurance, you can request to have this fee waived, and you do this through Student Financial Services, and then that charge is taken off your account. So it can be a direct cost or an indirect cost, just depending on your particular situation. As I mentioned in the living expense component, this is what we use to budget for you. This is based on a monthly amount. This amount here is listed. This is for the academic year, this $26,550. But this is how we break it down. We allot $1,650 a month in rent if you're living off campus, $250 in utilities, $150 for parking, $650 for food, and then $250 for personal, for a total of $2,950 per month for living expenses. But like I said, you may not be spending this much in rent each month. So this is where you can kind of look at your own budget to see what you need to borrow, if anything, for living expenses when you're looking at accepting your aid package. But this is just kind of give you a guideline of how we budget it out for each student. But again, you may not be spending this much. In the circumstance where you may be spending more than this, the $29.50, this is a case where it'd be a special circumstance where you can certainly reach out to Richard, your counselor, or any of the counselors in the financial aid office to discuss what steps might be taken to see how we can help you cover those additional costs if you're exceeding this $2,950 a month. So once we get your FAFSA, we put together your cost of attendance, and then we get to do the awarding for students. For graduate level students, you're going to be awarded up to your full cost of attendance, so that estimated cost of attendance in federal loans. And this is going to include the unsubsidized federal Stafford loan. The maximum yearly amount is $20,500. And then the Graduate Plus loan would be awarded up to your remaining cost of attendance. If you're going to be receiving any scholarships, either outside or through the School of Nursing, those would also be accounted for in your aid package. Again, we can't exceed that total cost of attendance with all combined aid. Unfortunately, graduate students are not eligible for the federal Pell Grant or subsidized loan funds. Grant funding for graduate students is pretty limited. There's no federal grant funding for graduate students. There's limited state funding and then institutional funding perhaps, but you're not going to be eligible for the subsidized Stafford loan or Pell Grant at this point. There's a asterisk next to the Grad Plus loan because this loan is credit-based, so they do a simplified credit approval process if you decide to borrow from this loan. For undergraduate students, you're awarded your yearly maximum in federal student loans. So for dependent students have to include their parent information on the FAFSA, and they're eligible for up to $7,500 in federal loans. And this can be a combination of subsidized and unsubsidized loans, depending on the need information from the FAFSA. And then the independent students that do not have to include parent information on their FAFSA are eligible up to $12,500 for the year. And again, that can be up to $5,500 in subsidized loan, and then the remaining in unsubsidized loan funds if a student's eligible for subsidized funds. The subsidized loan is a need-based loan, so you have to show financial need based on the information from your FAFSA, and that's calculated from your income information, parents' income information if you're dependent, household size, asset information. That's where your expected family contribution comes in. So those are all calculated through your FAFSA. And then undergraduate students may be eligible for the Pell Grant, again, based on financial need and EFC from the FAFSA. And only students that have not already earned a bachelor's degree are eligible for the federal Pell Grant. So if you're pursuing your second bachelor's, unfortunately, you wouldn't be eligible for the Pell Grant. And these are just some basic eligibility requirements to receive federal aid. All students have to be enrolled in a minimum of 6 credits per semester. So for each semester they're trying to receive federal aid, you do have to be enrolled in at least 6 credits. So audited or non-billed coursework does not count towards the 6 credits. You do have to have a valid FAFSA on file for the current academic year. No outstanding requirements. So sometimes FAFSAs might come in with flags on them that have to be resolved before we're able to award federal aid. So it could be, we have to confirm citizenship or you've been selected for verification. So making sure you're checking your SERFS account to see if you have any of these requirements is really important because we have to make sure that those are all satisfied before we can award your financial aid that you're eligible for. And you have to be fully enrolled in a degree seeking program. And this is going to give you some information on some other forms of aid that might be available. So for undergraduate students, for the dependent students, because you have that $7,500 limit in the amount of you can borrow, if you're needing additional funds to cover items in your cost of attendance, your parents are eligible to apply for the Parent Plus loan. This is a federal loan that's also credit-based that your parent would apply for. There's also private student loans. We always encourage students to use this as kind of a last option if you've exhausted all federal funding, state funding, because private loans are going to have kind of varied interest rates, varied repayment options. So, we do encourage to use any federal aid you're eligible for first. And then if you need those additional funds, you can seek out private student loans. We can't endorse any particular lender for that. So that would kind of have to be doing some research on your own for those. There's also some scholarship and grant opportunities through the Maryland Higher Education Commission. Typically, you do have to be classified as an in-state resident for most of those awards, but they have a plethora of awards on their aid page that you can look at, as far as there's delegate awards, there's senatorial awards, there's some specific for School of Nursing, workforce shortage, things like that. So it's definitely a great resource, especially if you are in state, but I would still recommend if you're not in state, just to take a look to see what ones you may be eligible for as non-residents. And then, of course, the School of Nursing Scholarship Office has scholarship opportunities for incoming students that qualify. And then students that are attending the Shady Grove campus can also contact their office for scholarship opportunities that they can apply for, or if they're automatically considered for those as well. So now that we've completed our FAFSA, we have our cost of attendance, we've gotten you awarded with what you're eligible for. Now we go on to accepting the awards. For any student that is awarded a grant, like a federal Pell Grant for the undergraduate students, or grant funding that might have been awarded through the university, those are going to be automatically accepted on SURF. So there's no additional steps that you have to go in to actually accept those awards. We want you to have those funds. It's free money. You don't have to pay it back. So those are automatically accepted for you. Federal student loans that are awarded do have to be accepted if you do want to borrow those funds. So you would go on your SURFs account under the financial aid section and go through the process to the tab for accepting your award offer. Once you accept any federal loans, you're going to see a couple of additional requirements populate under the student requirements section on SURFs. So you want to make sure you're checking that to complete those requirements that have to be done before any of those loans can pay out. Main things are like we have an online request form that you have to submit. So we know to process the loan, you're going to be required to do entrance counseling so you understand the terms of the loan. You're going to be required to submit what's called a master promissory note, which is basically kind of like signing the contract for the loan. So there'll be a couple of those requirements once you accept on your SURFs account. If you're receiving a scholarship through the Maryland Higher Education Commission, you'll first want to go to your MD CAPS account and accept the award there and complete any certification that they require. And then usually around late August, September, MHEC, Maryland Higher Education Commission, will send us a roster of students that have awards out there that have been certified and accepted through their MD CAPS. And that's when we'll start posting those awards. So if you're expecting an award from MHEC, just kind of know that timeline-wise, you won't see those posted until into the semester, just because we don't receive those rosters until a little bit later. And then some of them do have a requirement where we have to certify enrollment. And so that's not done until after mid-September. So just keeping that in mind. And then School of Nursing scholarships that have been awarded to any recipients, those are added to your SURFs account, usually during the first month of the semester. Richard will enter those for students that have been selected. And then again, you don't have to go into SURFs to accept them. They're automatically accepted for you. This is kind of a guideline of the order priority of what to accept as far as the aid, so that you're utilizing the aid that's going to benefit you the most first, and then going from there. So of course, grant scholarships, free money, you don't have to pay it back. Always come first. Those are automatically accepted. Those are typically good to go. For undergraduate students, you would want to start with a subsidized loan. This loan does not start accruing interest until after your grace period. And so this one, is just going to be as it is what you've accepted. And then once you're no longer enrolled at least half time, so 6 credits, you have a 6-month grace period, and then interest begins. So this is one you would start with first, then the unsubsidized loan, because that one does start accruing interest while you're in school. And then Parent Plus loan if you need those additional funds, or a private student loan. For graduate students, because you're not eligible for the subsidized loan, you would start with the unsubsidized loan, because for graduate students, there is a difference in interest rate between the unsubsidized and Grad Plus loan. The unsubsidized loan always has a lower interest rate, and it's not credit-based, so that's what you would want to start with. Then if you need those additional funds to cover other items in your cost of attendance, that's when you would go onto the Grad Plus loan. And then, like we say, we try to encourage students to use federal funding, but if you decide you don't want to do a Grad Plus loan, then it would be private student loans from there. And this is some general information. This can be found on our website, and then it'll be updated on our website. And then it's also found at studentaid.gov. These are going to be the current loan terms. They just announced these through Department of Education for this upcoming year. These will be for any loans that are dispersed after July 1, 2023 and up through the following year through June 30th. So these are the new established interest rates for the different types of loans based on whether you're an undergraduate, graduate, and the type of loan. So as you can see, for the graduate level students, the unsubsidized loan has the lower interest rate compared to the plus loan. So that's why we always encourage you to take out the unsubsidized loan first, then the plus loan. And then we also have these origination fees, which I'll give a lot more detail a little bit later, but this is the percentage that's taken off the top of the loan before it pays out. So as you can see for the plus loan, it's also much higher than the unsubsidized loan. And then for the following academic year, so 2024, 2025, we won't know those new interest rates until about May 2024. So for the interest rate terms, the subsidized loan for undergraduate students, the interest begins when the grace period ends. So that grace period is once you've graduated or you're no longer enrolled at least half time at the university, you have a 6-month grace period before repayment begins. So during that time, that grace period, that 6 months, the subsidized loan was not going to be accruing interest. Now for the unsubsidized loan and plus loan, it is. For those loans, begins to accumulate as soon as the loan is dispersed. So typically that's 7 to 10 days before the start of the semester, as long as you've completed all loan requirements. So it's going to start accruing interest from that moment. Now you're not required to make any payments on it. You certainly can if you have the funds, but you're not required to. There's no penalty for early repayment though. And then the same for the plus loan. The interest is going to start as soon as the loan is dispersed if you've borrowed those funds. And then the difference is that repayment for plus loans, so this is going to be parent plus loan or grad plus loan. The repayment begins 60 days after dropping below 6 credits. So they don't go into an automatic 6-month grace period. You can request through your loan servicer to have a forbearance during that time, similar to your unsubsidized loan or subsidized loan, but it's not going to be automatic. So just keeping that in mind with those plus loans. So as I mentioned before in the loan terms, this origination fee. So this is the fee that is the amount that the government takes off the top of the loan before it's dispersed to the school. So that percentage for the subsidized loan and unsubsidized loan for both graduates and undergraduates is 1.057%. So they just take, a little over a percentage off the top of the loan. For the plus loans, it's 4.228%. So they do take a larger percentage from the loan before they pay the funds to the school, so we can pay those out to you. The amount of the fee, because it's a percentage, is going to depend on the amount that's borrowed from each type of loan. This is going to be a fee that it's not going to show up on your bill. It's not charged to you on your actual bill where your classes are, but we do include loan. You'll see line items in your cost of attendance for loan fees. You'll see for the plus loan fee and then the Stafford loan fee. And we just include those in the cost of attendance. So that way they're included in there, so that way you can still get awarded the max amount you can get in loans without being shortchanged. But they're not going to actually show up on your bill. Because they're taken out, these fees are taken out before the loan's paid out. If you decide to accept the exact amount of what your charges are once you're registered, just keeping in mind that if you only accept the exact amount because that fee is taken out, it's going to leave you with a deficit. So let's say your bill's $5,000, you accept exactly $5,000 for loans for that semester. Because there's going to be a percentage taken out of that loan, you're still going to have a little bit of balance. So just keeping that in mind. If you're fine paying that balance, out of pocket, or if you have other means of paying it, that's completely fine. Or you can always, adjust the amount that you've accepted. Just kind of some helpful hints for amounts to accept. So there's no required amount to accept in loans. You're not required to accept the loans. The cost of attendance is there to help guide you. What we award is going to be the maximum that you're eligible for based on your program, and if you're an undergraduate or graduate. So it's up to you kind of there to kind of use your cost of attendance as a guideline of what you may need to accept. For a lot of students, you don't have to, and you may not need to cover that full cost of attendance. Again, going back to like living expenses, transportation, you may not need funds to cover those. If you're, paying those yourself and you don't need additional funds, or if you have assistance from elsewhere. So you may not need to cover that full cost of attendance. So you can always, on your SURS account, it gives you the option to accept the full amount, a partial amount, or decline them. So you have the option to modify. So if you need to accept less, that's completely fine. If you only want to take enough to cover your bill, you're certainly welcome to do that. I would say things to keep in mind, as we put on here, keep in mind those origination fees, and then also keeping in mind that when you're accepting your package, it's typically for the whole year. So you don't want to accept, if your fall bill is $5,000, you don't want to accept just $5,000, because that'll typically be split half of that for fall, half for spring. So it'll only give you $2,500, minus origination fees for fall. So keeping those sorts of things in mind. And then you're of course free to take out less than your bill, or not take out any at all, as long as you make sure you have some sort of payment arrangement ready to go so that you can pay that in a timely fashion. If you're using just out of pocket, if you're planning on using a 529 college savings plan, whatever it might be, just make sure you have a plan going forward. We always encourage students to borrow smart. So just kind of reiterating that these are for the academic year. So make sure you're accepting based on, it's going to be split half for fall, half for spring typically. Now, if any students planning on attending starting spring 2024, you're going to be awarded only just for spring 2024. It's not going to be split fall, spring. And this is just for the academic year too. It's not for the entire program. So don't think you have to borrow everything now and save some for next academic year starting fall 2024. This is just for this term of this academic year. I will say that we do have loan adjustment periods in each the fall term and the spring term, so that if you've gotten to a situation where you've borrowed too much, let's say you weren't sure, you took out the full cost of attendance, you're a graduate level student, and then you realize you got your refund and you're like, I don't need these funds, I've borrowed way too much. We have a loan return period where you can return the funds through us, and it's as if you never borrowed them. It takes care of any interest that has accrued at that point, and then also takes care of the origination fee. So it's definitely a good feature to utilize if you've over borrowed. Just keeping in mind, we'll have the dates for the period on our website, but just making sure that you're aware, it's usually early October through mid-November. So just making sure you're meeting the deadline to complete the requirements for that loan return period. But it's certainly a good thing to utilize if you've taken out more than you actually need. Similarly, if you didn't accept the full aid package that you have and you find yourself that you do need additional funds, we do, during that same kind of time period, we have an option to increase the amount you've accepted. Now, if you're not sure if you qualify for an increase, you're not sure if you have room in your cost of attendance, or you're not sure if you still have loan funds available to you, certainly reach out. You can contact us and we can let you know what you may be eligible for as far as an increase. For undergraduate students, it may be that only eligible for your parent to increase their Parent Plus loan. For graduate level students, it might just be a Grad Plus increase, but we can certainly help you determine, what you may be eligible for as far as an increase. And then just a reminder that when you accept it, again, it's going to be split between the semesters, unless you're attending just starting in spring, or some students might be like a fall graduate. So there are some exceptions to that, but typically when you're accepting your aid package, it's going to be for the fall and spring semesters. Just some considerations, things to note so that you're not concerned with your aid package. Pell Grant and some state awards, as I mentioned, pay out after we've confirmed enrollment, which is our census date, which is typically around mid-September, and then usually mid-February for the spring term. So those don't pay out until a little bit later. So come August, you might see like loans pay out towards your bill, and you might have a balance because you're waiting on Pell to pay out. But just keep in mind, those pay out a little bit later. So it's typically not any reason of concern. You can always check with us to make sure you've done all the requirements, but those are going to pay out a little bit later, since we do have to confirm enrollment for a lot of them. And then if your aid is not paying out when it's scheduled, so if your loans don't pay out, before classes start like they're supposed to, or after that census date, your Pell still hasn't paid, go ahead and contact us. We certainly recommend reaching out to us sooner rather than later, just to make sure you've completed all requirements. There might be something that just got missed and that is a quick fix, or just making sure you're keeping track of what's paid out. making sure you don't have a bill, you don't have a balance. You don't want to come to November when registration for spring starts and you have a bill and you're not sure why, and now you can't register. So just earlier the better. We're, always welcome you reaching out to see what may be an issue if something's not paying out. And then if you do have a bill, Students Financial Services is going to send you monthly reminders that you have a bill. So don't ignore those emails. You'll get some before the start of the semester, before aid pays. Those, you can recognize that they're there, but if you've accepted aid, completed requirements, you should be fine. After the semester has started, if you start receiving bills, and after Pell should have paid, if you're getting Pell, anything like that, if you're still receiving these notices that you have a bill, that's when you'll want to make sure you're checking your account to make sure things have paid. If not, contact us so we can see what might be an issue. So for Student Financial Services, this is their contact information. So they're the ones that will be sending you notifications that you have a bill. They'll be the ones to contact if you have questions regarding any of your charges. If you're waiving your health insurance, you want to make sure that that goes through, monitor your TouchNet account. You'll be able to see if that's waived, if you've submitted a waiver. If you've submitted a waiver, it's been approved and you don't see that charge removed, you would want to contact Student Financial Services to see maybe the issue with that. If you've accepted funds and you've borrowed loans and you're expecting to receive a refund to use for those indirect costs like living expenses, and you haven't gotten that yet, they would be the ones to contact. If you have questions about setting up Bank Mobile to get your refund, that would be your contact. If you're expecting any outside scholarships, that would be the office to send those to. And if you're using like a 529 college savings plan, they would set that up with you as well. Here's the contact information for the main office of the registrar. If you're planning on applying for or petitioning for in-state residency, they would be the ones to answer any questions regarding that. And then just general registration for classes as well. And then this is our main information. So this is our dedicated email inbox for the School of Nursing for financial aid questions. So it's nursing@umaryland.edu. Your counselor for the School of Nursing for financial aid, Richard Legendry, is the one that monitors this one. So he will be responding to any inquiries through this financial aid. And that brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. I know it's a lot of information and it's kind of just a quick financial aid 101, but if anyone has any general questions they have right now, I'd be happy to help.